Well, hate crimes targeting religious communities in Canada have been on the rise, be it Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, or Christian. So, what's behind this concerning trend? We're joined today from Ottawa by Reverend Dr. Andrew Bennett, Faith Communities Program Director at Cardis, which is a nonpartisan Christian think tank. Andrew, you recently co-wrote a report about the rise of religious hate crimes in Canada, and apparently they more than doubled between 2009 and 2021.
We're seeing in particular increase in hate crimes, especially against Catholics. And that was during that whole period when churches were being targeted in the wake of the Kamloops controversy. But then also targets against Jews and Jewish institutions continues to grow. Jews are the most targeted religious group in the country consistently. And when you look at groups that are subject to hate crimes, whether they be different racialized communities or ethnic communities, religious communities, Jews are consistently in the top 3 of the most targeted groups. So that's very concerning. The rise in anti-Semitism in this country is a very concerning thing that we should all be worried about. But particularly the faith communities that can stand beside the Jewish community and support them in solidarity during an increase in anti-Semitic attacks and hate crimes is very concerning. So we should all be very vigilant as Canadians in addressing this, but it also begs the question, why is this happening?
Exactly. It should be concerning to all Canadians. And so why is this happening? What have you been finding from your research?
Well, it's sometimes hard to draw direct correlations, but we've seen through other research that we've done with the Angus Reid Institute out of Vancouver that people's appreciation of what religious communities do is declining. We see that a growing number of people amongst Canadians that are on the more secular side of the spectrum, so they're either not religious or they're not actively involved in any particular faith community. They tend to be a little bit more hostile to people that are openly religious. And what we found is that amongst the non-religious and those who are sort of less inclined to be engaged in any sort of spiritual activity, they are the most intolerant of different religious communities. They seem to only really want to be tolerant of themselves. But on the other hand, amongst those who are deeply religious and very, very religiously committed, they see all faith communities being of benefit to the country, except for atheists. So it's a bit of a flip, but I think it's interesting to note that the more religious you are, the more tolerant you are of different views and different beliefs. And I think that's something that we need to recover within our society, that we need to be able to see in one another, even amongst people that have very different views, whether those are ideological views, ethical views, moral views, or religious views. We need to recognize that we're all in this together, that we're all citizens together. These are our neighbors. These are the people that we work with, that we go to school with. And they might hold beliefs that are very different from us, but we need to be able to see in them the dignity that they bear as human beings. And these are people just like us, and religious people have a role to play within our society and within our public debates.
I believe you were pointing out that Angus Reid poll, right, that was telling us the proportion of Canadians who see the overall contributions of religion and faith communities is very good or more good than bad. So that's fallen, what, 38%, from 38% to 31% in 5 years, right, between 2017 and 2022. So that's not a very high percentage of people like in favor of religion, is it?
And I don't know if it's so much people who are in favor of religion. I think part of it is just a lack of awareness, or we might call it an amnesia, around what religious people do. So I think sometimes there's a perception amongst some in our country and in our communities that religious people are sort of part of these exclusive clubs. And what they do in their churches or their synagogues or their mosques or their gurdwaras, it's just for them. When in fact, religious people don't just engage in public worship simply for their own benefit. What happens is that when they engage in public worship in these buildings that dot our communities, they then take that out into the community and seek to live it out in ways that are for the benefit of all citizens. So I think most Canadians know that, if you want to take advantage of a 12-step program, you can go down the street to Sacred Heart Parish because they've got 12-step programs. Or if you want to put your son or daughter into Girl Guides or Boy Scouts, you can go around the corner to Christ Church Anglican. Or if you want to take advantage of maybe an In from the Cold program. If you experience homelessness or you're struggling, you can go to a gurdwara, a Sikh temple that might have their communal kitchen open that can feed you. So at the very local level, I think many Canadians know that this is what faith communities do, but often when we get up to the level of government, the business community, our cultural institutions, they sometimes forget that this is what religious people do. And so that's an amnesia that we have to address, I think, if we want to ensure that we can have a better understanding of who are religious people and why do they do what they do, why do they believe what they believe.
Have you done any research on why people are against it specifically in terms of what their viewpoints are?
Well, I think just to go back to something I said earlier, there's the flaw on one side where we have our institutions that have bought into an idea that religion has to be a purely private matter. If you're a religious person, you keep your religion at home or you keep it in the place of worship. You don't bring it into the public square. But someone who's religious, just as someone who's secular, can't just sort of remove their beliefs and what shapes their viewpoints and what shapes their life and how they live their lives simply like by taking a jacket off and putting it back on. You know, our beliefs are something that deeply shape us as human beings, whether we're talking about religious beliefs or ideological beliefs, moral beliefs, what have you. And so I think what we want is we want all of us, as we engage the public square, whether that's in the life of the business community or in government or in our schools or universities, we want to be able to bring our whole selves into that community and to be able to contribute based on our deeply held beliefs. Now, of course, we're not going to have those beliefs maybe forefronted all the time, but they certainly inform how we engage with one another and how we speak to one another. So on the one hand, I think our institutions have to do a better job of creating that openness and that space for religious people to engage in public debate, to present their beliefs in the public square, knowing that there's going to be disagreement, and disagreement's okay. At the same time, on the flip side, I think faith communities, religious leaders, people from different religious traditions have not always done a good job at explaining why they believe what they believe. Because many of us who are religious, we have tended to privatize our faith. We've kept it private because we think that's what we have to do. We have forgotten how to explain ourselves and how to say, well, this is who I am. This is what it means to be, in my case, a Ukrainian Catholic. What do I believe? So instead of just saying, I'm opposed to this or I'm in favor of this, I need to be able to express why I am.
Right.
And that's important. And I think our faith communities also need to be opening up more to different other aspects of our civic life. To make sure that our places of worship are open so that people can see what goes on in places of worship as a means of educating, a means of informing, and really working towards a genuine and deep pluralism, diversity that actually includes religious people.
So any thoughts as to what religious leaders can do to change the perception that religion is damaging?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to try and have a better understanding of what people mean by damaging. Is damaging about religion. And religion as a sort of a concept it's a very difficult thing to try and engage. But when we're looking at religious people, and so when we see people in front of us, including our neighbors, maybe our close friends, family members, fellow students who hold a religious tradition and who stand by that religious tradition and believe something very different, we should ask them, why do you believe what you believe? Tell me about your faith. Tell me about what your faith means to you. So we need to do a much better job as a society, I think, to get away from some of the clickbaity approach that we have to engaging one another through social media and so forth, and actually to sit down and have conversations with one another, to be in community with one another, to have people coming into our churches, into our synagogue or other places of worship, to better understand what we believe and to have more of those interactions. I think that's going to be much healthier for us as a society in the long run if we can get to know who we are and who we are as human persons and why we believe certain things. So that's very important. So religious leaders, I think, have to be, we always have to make an effort to welcome people who maybe are curious about what we believe, don't understand what we believe, and to engage them with open arms and to try and explain as best we can who we are. At the same time, on the level of our cultural institutions, the business world, government, there has to be, I think, a greater openness to different forms of religious expression. That people who are religious have something to contribute to our society. And indeed, up until 50 years ago, Canada was a deeply religious country. And there's still a significant portion of the population, depending on how you slice or dice it, roughly 20% of Canadians who are religiously committed. These are people that believe in God, that are attending religious services on a weekly basis, that are reading sacred texts, that want their kids to be educated according to a religious tradition, and so forth. And so that's a pretty significant proportion of the population. And there's another significant portion that are people that are maybe spiritually uncertain. They're not sure exactly what they believe, but they have some encounter with the transcendental. And this is something that's very core to who we are as human persons. And so I think we need to do more, both at the level of faith communities and at the level of our institutions, to speak about why people believe what they believe and what is it that they believe. How does that impact how they engage with others?
Mm-hmm. And perhaps there needs to be more positive media coverage as well, given to how many benefits these religious groups provide for society. So when you think of how many soup kitchens, homeless shelters, all of that you'd mentioned as well, immigrant support programs are all provided by religious groups. So maybe there needs to be more positive messages there.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is there anything that business or educational leaders could do, any steps that they could take to maybe change the way religion is viewed?
Well, we recently did a project a couple of years ago here at Cardis that looked at provincial education curricula. And we looked at public school curricula at the primary and secondary level in British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, and Nova Scotia to get a bit of a kind of a bird's eye view across provinces of different sizes, different degrees of ethno-religious, multicultural diversity, and so forth. And what we found is that often religion was simply not discussed at all in public schools. The province of Ontario is probably doing the best job of trying to introduce religious concepts into the classroom, but other provinces, such as British Columbia, simply don't want to speak about it. And given the trends in our country in terms of immigration, we're receiving a lot more immigrants that are coming from deeply religious countries in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and so forth, that come to this country, and we want them to come with everything, all that they bring into our communities, including their religious beliefs. So if you have a primary school where you've got a diversity of people in the classroom, and you've got Johnny sitting next to Fatima who wears a hijab, I'm sure Johnny probably wonders, why does Fatima wear a scarf on her head?
That's a really good point. No, you're absolutely right. So there needs to be that sort of religious, almost appreciation for each other's culture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's not about inculcating a particular religious doctrine in the schools. I think public schools should necessarily have a secular character to them. They should not be advancing any one particular religious tradition. But you're going to have students that are deeply religious. And I think it's important that other students can engage with their classmates in a way that is healthy and in a way in which they can understand, hey, what does it mean for, my friend to be a Muslim or my friend to be a Sikh? Mm-hmm. And what does that mean in their life? Because then as those young people grow up and take roles in society, they're going to be much more able to have a broad-minded view about religious people.
Awareness is everything, isn't it? Awareness, absolutely. No, I love that. I really appreciate what you said there. It's too bad we're out of time here, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Bennett.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Dr. Andrew Bennett is the Faith Communities Program Director at Cardis.